welcome everyone, and I'm glad to see you here at the Imagine Church podcast, where our goal is to bridge the Sunday to Sunday gap. My name is John Harrison, and today I am joined by all of the Imagine Church staff for a little bit of a special, extra episode of the podcast, where we're just going to sit and talk about the 5-year birthday of Imagine that is coming up this Sunday. And we're just going to take some time looking back on what these past 5 years have been like, and get a little bit of everyone's perspective and just have a good time, just thinking back and remembering how great the past 5 years have been. And so to start, we're just going to have some fun questions to answer. And then as we continue on, we'll move into some of the more serious stuff. And so the first question that I have for everyone, I'd like to hear from everyone on these first few, is what is your favorite Joshism? So for anyone who's been around Josh for any significant period of time, just like, with anyone, you will learn that he has phrases and sayings that he just really loves and he sticks to them. And lots of times they go in cycles. But I'm just curious, what have been some of your favorite Joshisms over the past 5 years?
I just need to jump in the very beginning and say I object to this question. So no, I'm just kidding. No one enjoys phrases more than me. So yeah.
All right. This isn't quite a phrase, but Josh has his own specific rating scale that he uses. This one he uses pretty consistently. For example, got a text last night that something was a 12 out of 10, which in Josh's mind, that means really, really great. It's never a 10 out of 10, always a 12 out of 10. And I can't remember the other specific numbers that he uses, but only in Josh's world do they have specific meanings, and everyone around that works closely with him knows when he says something's a 3 out of 10, not good.
I think it's rare when the number falls within the range of possibilities. It's usually a negative something out of 10 or an over 10. So
yeah, one similar to that, which really it took place more so in my time in youth ministry, but occasionally will show up here at Imagine as well, is when Josh is talking about a specific number, for example, 3, and he'll go, not 1, not 2, not 4, but 3, and always just comes back to it. That's one that I've been a big fan of over the years as well.
I think the singular phrase that has become entrenched in our own household vocabulary is just go big or go home. I don't know how many meals or just basic day-to-day things that will somehow turn into a go big or go home situation. So that is not my own. I know that's not my own, so I know exactly where that comes from.
Yeah, well, you're welcome. I'm glad that I'm influencing the DeCamillis family. So,
like right now with this podcast, we're going big or we're going home.
It's true. That's good.
On a more serious note, one of the ones that I've really liked is just the phrase that if you're not dead, God's not done. That is one that has become really common and really popular at Imagine, of just that idea of, if you are still living, if you're still breathing, God can still use you and use your life and work through you, no matter what situation you're in. Josh, do you have a favorite Joshism, or do you just love them all equally?
The funny part is that I rarely, if ever, know that that's my phrase. It always has to be somebody who points it out to me, and then at that point it's like, oh yeah, you're right, I far overuse that phrase. And I like what you said. It's always consistently been with me. There's like anywhere between 10 and 15 phrases that I'm using in any given time, and they slowly, the last few are cycling out while a new couple of them are coming back in. So it's been I don't know why it's always been that way, but You're welcome, world. I'm glad that I'm contributing in some small way. So.
I mean, I think everyone does that. Everyone has their own like phrases or sayings that they use a lot. It's just for some reason yours have been the ones that get pointed out in the past. But yeah, so another question that I would love to hear from everyone on is if you have a favorite Sunday morning from your time at Imagine. I mean, I know it's a lot. For all of you guys, it's been 5 years. For me, it's been like 1.5, so I have less to think about. But if you have a specific Sunday that you were like, yep, this is my favorite Sunday.
So we've got about 250 to choose from. Is that about right? from my math?
Yeah, I think the math adds up there.
Ooh.
That's a hard one to answer because there's like the serious ones, and then there's like the ones that are really memorable. Like Cricket Sunday is one that all of us on staff remember. We were meeting at Kaleidoscope Charter School. I don't even know, it's probably year like 3, somewhere in there, year 2, year 3, and we're meeting in this gymnasium. I believe it's during the summer, and there is just the loudest cricket ever. And the thing was not quiet the entire service. Like people were trying to find it. Like nobody could find this thing. We never did find it. It just went off the entire service, worship, message, anything and everything in between. And so we affectionately call it Cricket Sunday. So that's one of my immediately when you say favorite. I don't know if that's one of my favorites, but definitely one of the more memorable memorable Sundays that we've had.
Yeah, we've had a lot of memorable ones. It's probably okay to mention this since you mentioned Cricket Sunday. The fact that peel back the curtain a little bit here. When there's a memorable Sunday, we have a habit of actually naming them as such. So, outside of Cricket Sunday, I think there have been some extenuating circumstances that have created like 2 or 3 disaster Sundays. Those are memorable for very different reasons. But honestly, it's hard for me to think. It's kind of a cop-out. It's hard for me to think past our very first. I mean, our grand opening was very memorable and very special in a lot of ways. That was a very unique experience in so many ways. So it's tough to be that one for burned into my memory and significant ones. So the grand opening, it's tough to beat that one. That was a good one. That was exciting.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to choose just one. There's so many and so many stories that could be shared about Sunday morning, specifically just all of the circumstances we've walked into with renting a school. You never know what you're gonna find necessarily when you walk in on Sunday morning.
I feel like that could be a podcast in and of itself, where we just talk about all the behind the scenes of Sunday mornings and when we walked into places that we were renting and what we found and discovered. So
Yeah.
Painting, flooding, I don't know. That's just a couple.
The one time we couldn't get into the building we were renting and I had to do it in the park. That was very early on, but did happen. So lots of memorable Sunday mornings, but I think it's so hard to choose. Easters are always super special to me and always stick out just from all of the behind the scenes work that go into planning Easter, especially for kids, and just being intentional in prepping for that and for families to have fun, but also get to hear the message of Easter, and just all of that excitement in the room is always very memorable. To the excitement of the first Sunday online of like, we don't know what we're doing and we're gonna do it, and just that feeling of somewhat success afterwards of like, hey, we pulled it off. And yeah, lots of moments in between for sure.
That's good.
I think mine is similar to Anthony's. Although I was not there for the first grand opening, I was able to be a part of. I don't remember if we called it a grand opening or what we ended up calling it. But our first Sunday after we moved from Kaleidoscope to STMA West, that Sunday is one that that sticks out in my mind, and that's special for me because I mean, there's so much excitement around the idea of being in a new building and doing something new, and you know, there are a lot of people there, and you could just like you could feel the energy from everyone, and then on top of that, like knowing and being on staff and being a part of all the work that went in before that, getting to the point of like actualization where it was like, okay, we had all these plans and these thoughts and everything we wanted to happen, and then being able to see that actually come true, and that actually happen is a Sunday that definitely sticks out for me as one of my favorites.
Yeah. I'll never forget. I mean, grand opening, like Anthony said, will be forever, just that was just such a special Sunday. But that very first Easter as well, and when we did a service that interspersed music throughout the message, and we ended with How He Loves. I think it's technically John Mark McMillan who sang it first, but David Crowder who popularized it. And I still can't hear that song to this day without being brought back to that service and how we ended it. And the people that gave their life to Christ that day, that was just a powerful service and a powerful time.
So along a similar idea, similar train of thought, just wondering, like, what are some of your favorite just memories in general, or favorite stories? I mean, again, there's a lot. Like you said, Anthony, it's like 200 and it's probably like 250 some Sundays. You know, there's a couple, it adds up to be a couple more, but then you miss a couple. And so probably somewhere around there, but this is Sundays and everything in between. And so if to give you guys a little bit of time to think about it, I can start off by sharing one of mine. I guess it's not really a specific memory or a specific story, but for people who know Josh and I and our relationship, and how that has changed and grown throughout the years. It was back to youth group. I think it was like a missions trip to, I don't know if we were in Rochester or Duluth, or not a missions trip, but it was a trip to either Rochester or Duluth. And there was one day where Josh and I spent a significant amount of time together that day. And from that day on, we were just a ridiculous duo and a ridiculous pairing and making jokes all the time. And the two of us would sit there and be like close to tears at our own jokes. And everyone else would sit around and be like, what is going on with the two of them? And now working with Josh, it's, at times like it's some of the exact same stuff, where we're just sitting there and Josh and I are laughing our butts off, and Abby's on the other side of the table looking at us like, how do I put up with these guys every day? But yeah, that's been a lot of fun. Just getting to, get back to that relationship and spending a lot of time together like we did back then, and just having a lot of fun together. That's been something that I've really enjoyed.
Okay, I have 3. And I'm sure I could list a lot more. First was, this is just a specific kids moment that sticks out to me. There's hundreds and hundreds of other stories that I've loved getting to just spend time with the kids and get to know them. But one Sunday morning, I think it was last year, one of our elementary boys came up to me, and he was so proud. We'd been working on memorizing a verse, and he wanted to share his verse with me. And he did it, like I just stopped everything in the middle of the craziness of Sunday morning, and he said it to me, and he was so proud and pumped, and like celebrated. And then he also wanted to show me his notebook that he had been writing in, and he had been writing prayers. And they were like, I mean, just prayers from an elementary kid's heart. And it was just really cool reminder in the midst of Sunday mornings are crazy as a staff person. And just to be able to stop and spend that time with him, and just remember why we do all the crazy things we do on Sunday mornings. That will always just stick out to me as one of my favorite memories. Second was just the very, very first small group that Nate and I were able to be a part of. Those friendships that, even though that group has, moved on, we are able to always engage in those friendships, and that's super special to us. Just all the memories and laughs and hard times that we were able to experience with them. And then last thing, I guess, is just the staff relationships that we've been able to build, times that our families have been able to hang out. I mean, it's been a lot of a lot of time of planning, and I think you guys were Nate and I's first house guests. We hadn't even really moved into our house yet. I don't even know if we were married yet. And you guys came over and had pizza on our kitchen floor and stuff like that. So I'm super thankful, and those will be treasured memories for sure.
Yeah, it's hard to narrow it down to just a few stories, because there literally are so many that you could tell. I also am just thankful for the staff and the relationship that we've had. I think it's a really unique thing that we're 5 years into this thing, and basically myself and our family, and then Anthony, you and your family, and Abby, you and Nate, and now your family, like, we've been a part of this thing for 6-7 years now. We were getting together, planning, praying, 2 years before this thing ever officially launched. And to just see how God has kept us together, and the camaraderie that we have and the relationships that we have, like, those are really, really significant and unique. I've been in ministry for a long time, and I'm thankful for the relationships that I have, but this one has been special, and so I'm really thankful for that. On a little bit of a less serious note, I think one of my all-time favorite stories, and we were talking about this right before we started the podcast, was the very first Sunday where we held a baptism service. And it's supposed to be like your big joy-filled day, and it was like this huge step where people are taking their steps of faith. And we discovered that there was a hot tub rental company in Elk River, Minnesota, and so they were only like 10-15 minutes from where our school was. And so we rented a portable hot tub for them. And when the guy drove into the parking lot and dropped off our portable hot tub, it had a giant sign on the side of it that said Captain Party Time. And so we were able to baptize, I think it was like 6 or 7 people that very first baptism service, with a giant like Captain Party Time sign in every single like camera shot. It was so big, the advertisement they had on the side of this thing. And so I ended up calling it Captain Party Time's Excellent Adventure. But when I think about stories, I'm always drawn to that one in Captain Party Time. It was a great moment. But if I think about it, to me, church has always been about people. A ministry is about relationships, and so I think of people like Rob and Beth Solly. They were a part of our launch team. They were people that I had significant relationship before with. They attended the church where I was the youth pastor at before I started Imagine, but they ended up coming and being a part of our church. And they were only with our church for a short period of time, maybe like a year and a half, something like that. But God just really moved in their lives during that season. And it just was such a joy to watch them serve and to fall back in love with church again. They had gone through some challenging situations leading into Imagine, and they ended up leaving Imagine not because they were looking for another church, but because they really believed in our mission so much of inspiring new beginnings and going big and going home, that they felt God was calling them to move into the inner city in St. Paul and to be a part of the solution in helping with all the challenges that St. Paul faces, and so many of our inner cities face. And so, I think about, some of my favorite stories are people like Rob and Beth Solly. Like I love that couple to death and their boys, and am so thankful for the time they spent at Imagine. They definitely mean a lot to me and to our story.
I'll piggyback off of that really quick and just mention that, yeah, it's the times we have with the people that we know and love, and it's never one thing. It's going to Twins games or playing top golf with guys or goofier things like foot golf or something like that. Like it's not one. It's all of those things put together are some of the best things that come to mind. So I'll throw some of those in there. That and the reindeer. When we rented a reindeer, that was great. Should have opened with the reindeer.
What I love most about foot golf is that some random guy was there playing and just like ended up in our group. Like we just ended up playing foot golf with some random guy from the Big Lake area. That was I thought for sure that he was like somebody's friend that they had brought, and then we were all standing in the parking lot after it. It was like, wait, you didn't know him? No, you didn't know him. You didn't. Like, no one knew who he was. He just randomly came and played with us. So that was pretty amazing.
I forgot about that, but I did not forget that somewhere there exists some video of Josh, you swimming in one of the hazard ponds.
I forgot about that. I try to forget that. Yeah, that is true. I did dive in after I stole a soccer ball from my son, kicked it into the water, and then had to go get it. So,
Yikes.
Man, well, it's a lot of fun hearing, some of the stories, especially for me, the stories from before my time at Imagine. And it's fun just getting to talk about some of those things and relive some of those things. And now I want to move into a little bit more like serious territory, a little bit more serious conversation here. And just to start, I mean, having a job at a church plant is very different from lots of other jobs you could get, where you, generally speaking, you go out and you seek a job. Like if you're going to go into business, or, if you're going to be a teacher or whatever, you go out and you seek that job. But lots of times, when you find yourself working at a church plant, you were asked about being a part of it. And so really more specifically for Anthony and Abby, I was just curious, when Josh first came to you with this idea of starting a church, like what was it about working at Imagine that initially you were like, you know what, yes, like God wants me here, like I'm supposed to be a part of this?
All right, that's a good question. It was a long time ago that this all took place. I guess some of the initial conversations, I was volunteering for Josh at the time. I remember the first time he ever mentioned church planting to me. And it was more of like, I think I'm going to do this someday, but hopefully not anytime soon. And conversations just between the two of us just kind of happened casually, and just started becoming more frequent, I guess, to the point where he was really feeling called to church plant. And I guess I don't remember a specific moment of you asking me, Josh. Maybe you were trying to get rid of me uh, by not asking me. But I don't have necessarily a specific moment that sticks in my mind of like, hey, will you do this with me? It was more of, I was a part of that processing along with Josh. Some of the more significant moments that stick out to me in my personal journey were I was in school to become a special ed teacher, and I just really felt that I wasn't going to be in that field very long. So I remember sitting down with my parents and being like, hey, so you know this degree that I'm about to graduate with? I don't think I'm going to use it very long. I think I'm going to go into ministry. I remember being pretty terrified to have that conversation with them. Thankfully, my parents are amazing, and they're like, yep, we could have, like, we knew that. So they probably knew that I was going to end up in ministry long before I ever did. And yeah, it just kind of evolved from there to the point of Nate and I being on the launch team, and kind of my role evolving throughout the years from there. And so, yeah, it's been a wild ride. Other than I can say, like, it was only God. Like, nothing about the decision-making process for me would look logical on paper, but it was the only thing that I was certain this is where I was supposed to be.
Yeah, so it's interesting. There, you could almost say, I don't know if there was a specific moment, but when Josh and I worked together at Grace, we had multiple conversations about far off in the future what it would look like to consider church planting. It's something that's always, I've just had a little bit of a spark for, just always. I can't quite put my finger on that. I guess it's providential in some ways. I've always been interested in fresh, new expressions of the church, and I'm not the only one to have seen something in Pastor Josh that says, there's something there. Like, that's a guy who's going to plant a church someday, and it's something I can get behind and would love to be a part of. And so somewhere along the line, I remember having a conversation and said, hey, when you're ready, give me the call. Like, I'll hop right in. And then years later, that call finally came. And I was like, all right, I said I'd do it. But there's more to that story too. I don't have time to get into that, but the timing was exceptional. It was truly providence. The timing was really amazing. That there was just a leading that we were moving towards something else in terms of ministry, and the call came at a very opportune time. It was interesting. It was fun to say, yep, that's it. That's a clear green light, go.
Yeah, I would just piggyback off of what Anthony said. He referenced that when we spent time, I was a senior high youth pastor at a church in Brooklyn Park, and Anthony was led worship and did worship for me there. He ended up taking a different job, and he said, like, we had casual conversation before that of like, hey, maybe someday I'll plant a church, just kicking around, but you kick around all kinds of ideas, at that point. But I remember it was one of the last conversations we had before he officially stepped down and took this new position. And he just looked at me and said, hey, if you ever plant a church, like, I better be your first phone call, because I'm in. And I remember walking away from that conversation. It really was a pivotal moment in my own church planting journey. because the tone that he used and the way that he said it, it was the first time that I wondered, like, maybe this is something that I'm supposed to do. Like, if somebody like Anthony, believes in me enough to say that, like, that was a really pivotal moment in my journey. It was one of the first times that I really contemplated it on a significant level. And so I was really thankful. Yeah, literally years down the line, Anthony wasn't my first phone call. My first one was to my parents, but he was phone call number 2. So not 1, not 3, but 2. And I'm really thankful that he took that call. And I've been so thankful for his willingness and his family's willingness to jump in to be a part of this thing. So I know that wasn't a question directed at me, but I couldn't help but jump in because really it was a formidable part of my own journey as well in the midst of this.
That's right. I might be leading this thing, but you're the boss. You can do what you want.
That's fair.
I guess I can kind of answer this question as well. But for me, I went to school to be in ministry. And it was honestly like similar to Abby's experience, except I realized that I was going to go into ministry like 6 months before I was supposed to start college. So I figured that out a little late. At least, I mean, most people change their majors, but my parents definitely would have liked for me to have known or had some idea of what I was going to do before that point. But I went to school for ministry, to youth ministry specifically, and graduated and was back working at the job that I had worked in high school and looking for other positions in ministry, and kept applying for positions and not getting them, and applying and not getting them. And like one of the positions, there were over 100 people that had applied for it. It was a position that technically like I wasn't even qualified for, and what they had asked is like minimum qualifications. And it came down to me and one other guy, and he ended up being the right fit for that position. And had experiences like that where it felt like I was so close, but just didn't make it. And the whole time it was like, okay, well, like God clearly has to have something else for me. Like there clearly has to be something else. But during that time, Josh and we were out to lunch one day. 'Cause we just would get lunch sometimes and hang out. And he was like, hey, I know you're looking for a job. I know you want to be in ministry. Like, just come hang out with me and Abby a couple days a week and work with us. Help us on some stuff. Do whatever. And then that turned into, a part-time position, and just, essentially just helping out a little bit more. And when that time was up, it was, we sat down to have the conversation about, okay, like Josh was going to ask, okay, how can I help you in what's next? Like, how can we help you get to what's next? And it was like, you know what? I mean, I feel like this is what's next. Like God just wants me to be here. There is just something about Imagine. It just feels like home, and it feels like the place that I'm supposed to be in. It's where God wants me to be. And like Abby, like you had said, like, decision, like if you're looking at it objectively, like does it make a ton of sense? Probably not, but like it just feels right, and feels like I am exactly where God wants me to be. And that is a feeling that just feels so great. That just lifts so much weight off your shoulders when you can be confident in the fact that like you are exactly where God wants you to be. And so, yeah, that's how I ended up here. And it's been great. And I guess is a great segue into the next question of just talking a little bit about like what this journey has been like. Like I've said earlier, for you guys, it's been 5 years. And for me, it's been, roughly a year and a half. But so far, like the journey has been great. It's been great being a part of this staff. Josh talked earlier about like just how close all of the staff is. And, I obviously knew Josh really well, knew Abby quite a bit. Anthony and our paths hadn't really crossed. I mean, we were at Grace at the same time, but when you were there, I would have been down on the other end of the church, just, a little kid. But for me, like, I've just felt like I've been able to integrate into the staff and the staff culture really well. Myself and my, I guess now fiance, Linnea, we have felt like we've been able to integrate well with, the rest of the staff and all your guys' spouses, and just with the people at Imagine. It's been great. The people here at Imagine are great. It's been awesome getting to know people and getting to be a part of what God is doing at Imagine.
Yeah. So the question was, what has this journey been like? And that in and of itself would be a 3-day conversation. I know we're on recording online right now, and as soon as I said that, I saw Anthony and Abby both emphatically shaking their heads because they understand it better than anyone. It's been great, and it's been hard. It has been the best, and it has been the worst. It has been the most uplifting and the most discouraging. If I had to be honest, like those are some of the emotions that I would say. Like, this journey has been exponentially harder than what I thought it was going to be. I really thought that we had a great plan going into church planting. I thought that we had surrounded ourselves with the right people and were asking the right questions. And, for whatever reason, over the first 5 years, God has been incredibly faithful. That's why we're still here. But we've had more challenges than we've had success along the way. If you count it from a numeric standpoint or from a financial standpoint, it's felt like we've lived far more often in our history than probably we'd like to admit, not quite offering to offering, but close, to that. And, but I'm thankful. Like, if there's a word that I would have to say, it's thankful. Like, if I had to do this over again, I would. I've learned more about leadership. I've learned more about my own faith, and I've seen God work more in the last 5 years than I did in the previous 35. And I guess those are some of my reflections.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll get vastly different responses, because I was thinking I'd sum it up as our experience has been everything and amplified. Like, the highs are highs and the lows are lows. And the other thing that comes to mind as well is that it's been, and you were hinting at it too, Josh, that it's been uniquely challenging. Like, I can't imagine going into starting this 5 years ago with better counsel. Like, we had phenomenal counseling and leadership before us, and several not guardrails, but like we had tremendous support from people who've gone before us, a lot of affirmation and validations along the process. And so I can't imagine feeling less naive about starting Imagine, and yet the surprises have been so uniquely challenging. And what has been challenging has been the surprise. So it kind of catches you off guard. I mean, there's the usual challenges as well of the day-to-day operations and numbers, et cetera, and all of that. But the other challenges have been the surprises, the ones you don't see coming.
That's good.
Yeah. I don't even know how to sum it up. It has been a journey. That feels like a correct word. It's been growing for us in every area of our lives. Just in the challenges, in the successes, in figuring out what it looks like to be a family in ministry. Um, you know, just all of the things that that come with starting something, figuring out what what the details are of starting something, and something none of us have ever done before. Um, and I just think growing in our faith too, like Josh said, I've never learned more in the last 5 years, and that is true. We have seen God's faithfulness time and time and time again, in our personal lives, just in the lives of the church, and I would do it all over again too. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple different people had mentioned, like lots of learning through this process, and so I was just curious, like, what are some of those like specific things, some specific areas where you can point to and be like I clearly learned something here. Like for example, for me, when I went to school for ministry, and before I'd started working at Imagine, I I've never been a huge planner. I've never been, especially like a long-term planner. But I was pretty set in my mind that I was going to be in youth ministry for you know as long as I felt like I could effectively work in youth ministry. Most people, they end up like getting called to something else, or they like age out, feel like they can't connect with youth culture, feel like they don't have the energy to be with kids all the time, whatever it may be. I felt like I would be in youth ministry until that point, and then after that I did not see myself anywhere in like vocational ministry. I had assumed that I would go back to school, get a graduate degree in counseling, and do some sort of professional counseling. And who knows, maybe I'll do that again, or maybe I'll do that in the future. Maybe that is still in the plans that God has for me in the future. But after working at Imagine, I guess not after, because I'm still working at Imagine, but during my time at Imagine, one of the things that I have learned about myself is that I love being in vocational ministry. I like love it. And I am now at a point where I could see myself working in a church in a whole number of different capacities, for the rest of my life. And that was something that I thought was just not even an option before. I just didn't think that it was for me. Um, but yeah, since my time starting at Imagine, like I've just learned a lot about myself, um, professionally, and the things that I would like to do in the future. And more often than not, most of those things are in ministry. But that was not the case before I started at Imagine.
There's once again, there's a million different ways that you can answer this, and we could spend 3 days and still not do it all justice. um I think that one of the things that I've really learned is that God's way isn't our way, and being okay with that. um yeah, I sit here as the lead pastor of this church, and I know it's something that, intuitively it's the answer that we all give. Like, of course God's way is better than our way. Um, but we fight that. We just do. We fight it as humans. And the last 5 years, like, I think this has been an exercise for me again and again and again. And just saying, all right, God, like, whatever you want to do, not my way, but your way be done. Because it feels like every time I lay every plan and use every ounce of my leadership ability and draw the best out of us as an organization, and we're surrounded by great people at Imagine. Like, This church has just got an abundance of people that are faithful and filled with grit and have an incredible amount to add, not just at this church, but they could work at any church. I believe that about all three of you guys that are here. But just how many times I just have seen something happen and it hasn't gone the way that I had hoped or the way that I had wanted. It was hard. And then after a while, you just start asking all kinds of questions. Like, is it me? Am I in the right position? Am I doing the right thing? Like, do I need to quit? Am I the lid of this organization? Like, have I blown this for everybody? I just think about all the ways that God's been faithful. And it's just been this reminder that, man, his way isn't our way. And I'm going to be okay with that. And that would definitely have been something that I would always have given lip service to throughout my life. But it's something that I believe and actually put into practice a lot more. And I'll just say this real quick, because I don't want to spend forever. I don't need to take up all the time. But, the other thing that I've learned is that tears are real, and pain and hurt is real. And I think sometimes when we're in a church setting, we focus on the good of what happens, and understandably so. And we forget the challenges of what goes on behind the scene and the real tears that people cry, and that are shed, and the hurt that exists. And so one of the things that I've learned is just like, I'm not unique in that. There's a lot of other people that deal with those same things, but we don't talk about it as much as maybe we should.
So as we've discussed the past 5 years, I've categorized it as having, lots of challenges, and lots of areas where, God has just been faithful and God's shown up. And we've learned a lot of things throughout our time at Imagine. But what are some of those specific areas in the history of Imagine where it was just like so incredibly clear, like this right here in front of us is God just at work, whether it's in people on staff or in people attending Imagine, or things that are just like even just like Imagine adjacent, areas where throughout this process you've just been able to look and be like, this is just clearly God has his hand all over this.
I think consistently over and over again, it's been timing of various things, locations to buildings to moves to finances to right people, right time, whatever it is. It's been timing over and over again. Yeah, I don't know how much more detail to go into that one, but that's the big category I can think of that so many times.
Yeah, that's good.
The right thing has happened to fall into place. Specific donations, resources, otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah, it has felt like in every moment where it has felt like we just don't have very much left, whether that's energy-wise, whether that's money in the bank, organizationally, that God has walked alongside us and showed up in that moment. I mean, if you go back all the way to the beginning, we were originally supposed to launch this thing in like October. It ended up being December of 2015, December 6th of 2016 before we actually technically launched. Actually, I think it was December 5th, but December 5th of 2015 before we technically launched. And part of that was because like every single place, like it felt like we had a location and then it would fall apart, and we just had nowhere. And it was getting to the point where it was like, we were going to have to change where we were going to plant. I mean, there literally was nothing. And when we had no other cards left to play, it was at that moment that, somebody from Kaleidoscope reached out to us and said, hey, like, we'd love to have you in our space. And within like a few days, we were in at Kaleidoscope. And just the timing of that, I alluded to it a little bit, like some of the financial struggles that we've had, like it's been, we've been really challenged financially. And I'll never forget, this is one of the most pointed moments to me of where I remember seeing God. I'll probably cry, but that's because I'm a crier when I think about this story. But we were at a place where we didn't have hardly any money left. We were going into a Christmas season or into the month of December, and we didn't know. I didn't know how we were going to be able to afford Christmas. It didn't look like we were going to have enough money to be able to afford, staff moving forward. And we got a letter in the mail, and it was anonymous, and it was out of the blue, and enclosed in that was a check for $20,000. And to this day, I don't know who gave that amount of money, but I remember I had that in the letter. The language that was in that letter was so specific, because it was things like, I continue to see all the ways that you have been faithful to what God has called you to. And like every single line was just like the exact words that we needed, and like what we were feeling when it came to being discouraged. And I got that letter and I brought it, and I'll never forget this. I was at a Caribou in Big Lake, and I handed that letter to Anthony, and he read it, and we sat there and we just cried. We cried together sitting in the middle of the Big Lake Caribou as we read this letter, and just were reminded of like the faithfulness of God. And that hasn't been the only time. There's been 3 times, really 4 times in our church's history where the need has been so substantial that we have wondered, are we going to be able to continue? And in every single one of those moments, just when we think it's over, a check shows up, or God shows up in a really real and profound way and keeps us going. Whenever I think about it, I think about that Caribou. I think about Big Lake. And I wonder what it would have been like to be there and just see 2 grown men like just bawling. To be at one of those other tables. But that was just such a pointed, fantastic moment. For the rest of my life, I'll never forget reading that letter for the first time, and every single line just spoke to me.
I thought that was going to be a very different meeting.
Yeah, for sure. We all did. I mean, it literally was getting to the point where it was like we were sitting down, and it was like, on the docket was the elephant in the room that neither one of us wanted to talk about. And that is like, I don't know if we're going to make it.
Yeah.
And instead I was able to hand him this letter. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah.
I think one of the things about, all of those stories that some people might miss because they aren't necessarily a part of it, is that in those situations, like it's not like you sat down and wrote, a bunch, like 100 postcards and sent them out to people and were like, hey, we need money. I think about like when we made the decision to move from Kaleidoscope to STMA West, we had sat down, we talked about it, and we were like, there's going to be a significant like cost associated with this move. And I remember I think we were 2 days into, Josh, you had asked all of us on staff and our spouses and the leadership team to just pray, not specifically for money or for anything, but just to pray that if we were making the right decision, that God would make it clear to us. And 2 days after you asked all of us to do that, someone out of the blue said that somehow, some way, they caught wind of the fact that we might be moving, and that years ago God had put it on their heart that if we were ever to move locations, that they had a check that they were supposed to give us. And it was not that we were like putting out feelers and being like, hey, we're thinking about moving, would you support us financially? Like, these people just out of the blue were like, hey, if you move, we have this to give you. And it's just like, in some of those moments, it's like, I don't know that I have ever seen a more clear indication from God of like, hey, I am here. I'm a part of this. I'm supporting you in this. You're supposed to do this. Yeah, some of those moments have just been crazy.
Yeah, that was an amazing moment. Not that I'd forgotten about that one, but I forgot the detail that you're right. Like, we hadn't advertised that at all. I still to this day have no idea how that person would have caught wind of any of it.
I believe it was to the exact dollar amount that we had estimated hours before that. I think it's going to take about X amount.
Yeah.
And then 2 days later it showed up, and we're like, this.
Yeah. We all get a text from Josh, and it's like, hey, I think God sent a sign, sort of thing.
He kind of confirmed it.
Yeah. I think he gave us the green light on this one.
I think even in areas aside from finances, there's just been the timing theme of God working behind, in and through what tiny dreams we may have had from being a church that wanted to do stuff for the community and being able to be one of the first partners with the Sheridan story at Kaleidoscope, which is now Every Meal, and be one of their like pilot sites for moving this direction away from the cities. And even most recently, I think of the partnership with Alleluia Lutheran and being able to partner with what they're doing in the food, giving out food, food distribution that they've been able to do. We had a meeting with the staff and spouses and leadership team and saying like, we want to do something this fall that focuses on food and focuses on the needs in our community. And this partnership has worked out beautifully. We couldn't have asked for a better situation or partnership of another church that we can walk alongside in that. And so I think even in the biggest details, from finances to the tiniest little things, like we have seen God's timing and faithfulness over and over and over again. And just that little encouragement of like, yep, like I'm here.
So it's been great to look back at the past and the history of Imagine, coming up on 5 years now. And just looking at all the ways that God has been a part of that, and the story of Imagine over the past 5 years. But there's also a reality that like God has a future for Imagine. Us as a staff, we have ideas for the future and plans and things in mind for what's to come. And so, as you think about and as you look to the future, what does Imagine look like as we move forward? Which I know in and of itself, especially in a time like this, in the midst of a global pandemic, is such a hard thing to answer, to know like what next week is going to look like, let alone, a couple months, couple years down the road. But yeah, just what does Imagine's future look like?
That's another really, really good question. I think there's a couple of things that jump to mind right away, and I hope that Anthony and Abby would agree, and that is that we will continue to be an intentional church. Over the last 5 years, there really has not I can't think of a decision, maybe there have been, but I can't think of a decision or something that we've done where it's just been like off the cuff. Like we really do think intentionally and pray intentionally and talk about like what it is that we do and how we want to do it. And so I would anticipate that moving into the future that we continue to be an intentional church. And you know, I think that we're only beginning to scratch the surface on some of the ways that we can walk alongside our community. I really have loved the last year how much we've stepped outside of the four walls of the building that we don't own but rent, you know, and the ways that we walk alongside. I think, you know, 5 years from now, I hope that that's something that we're just continuing to do. You know, vision is one of the things that I love. So, I mean, I could talk for forever on that. Like, but I just think like we're going to continue to be a place where we see growth. That we're going to continue to be a place where people can come and experience God in a really real way. And I love the way that we have, I think it took about a year, maybe a year and a half into our church before we kind of accidentally stumbled upon like an imperfect church for imperfect people. But I love that. Like, I believe that about our church, that every single one of us, including myself, are just, you know, no one's better than anyone else. We're all sinners saved by grace. And that God is going to continue to use Imagine in a really real way in our community. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for his faithfulness. And so I'm excited. I'm excited to see what the next 5 years look like. I know that everything that I have planned, if I've learned anything from the first 5, is that whatever I think the next 5 are going to look like, they're not going to be. but I'm okay with that because I'm excited to see the ways that God works.
Yeah, I'm thinking about. Sorry, Abby, you go ahead. You go ahead.
I was going to say that's basically what I was going to say, is that I have a lot of, you know, we all have dreams or things that we hope to see accomplished and things that we will stay, you know, faithful to and intentional about, of course, but I also look ahead to the next 5 years in more so anticipation to see what God is going to do. The last 5 years, like we've all said, I mean, we could not have written that story at all. But we can point out every single moment of God's faithfulness. And I think that's what I look forward to, is being able to say at the 10-year mark and be able to point out all of the ways that he has been faithful, and that we have been faithful to what he has called us to this community. We picked this is talk about being intentional. In the beginning, selecting Otsego, Albertville, St. Michael area was an extensive process. All of our families spent a ton of time researching, and I mean, Nate and I spent a whole night in the car with Daff and Josh, and I think just Elijah. I don't think Isaiah was even born yet, driving around the Otsego area, like scouting out what Otsego was like. Like, we chose this area because we felt called to it, and I just think we will continue to serve it in the ways that we are called to.
Yeah, when I think about what does Imagine look like as we move forward, I laugh because we have no idea. but I mean, in the last year, let me hold that thought though. In the last year, we've reinvented what we do, like structurally, twice, like moving from Kaleidoscope to STMA and changing all the internal stuff, and then quickly going online 6 months after that. Like, but the advantage that we have and have had for quite some time is that Josh nailed it. Our mission, vision, and values have not changed. They've only solidified, and they've only manifested as well. Like, we've gotten involved with how many different meals programs between Elderly Lutheran, but also one meal and all of that. Like, we're up to the thousands of meals, more than that, way more than that. But like that's coming that we've been able to help provide. That's not coming from something that will ever change. It comes from the mission, the vision, the values of the church. And so that's, again, the greatest advantage we have. And that's the greatest future we're going to have, is coming out of that clear mission, vision, value. So it's two sides. Like you said, I have no idea what it's going to look like because last year has proven that. But at the same time, got a pretty decent idea of what we'll be up to and what we'll be cooking because of that clear mission that we have.
I know that we're wrapping up our time. And so I just want to say to those of you that have been a part of Imagine, just how thankful I am for all the people that have come, all the people that have given, all the people that have prayed. And whether you've ever attended Imagine or not, we have felt your prayers and we have felt your support. We are here because of the prayers and the contributions of some people that we know of, and honestly, probably hundreds, if not thousands more that we'll never know. And I'm thankful for that. It is an honor to be a lead pastor of this church. Like, I love Imagine Church, and I'm so thankful for all the ways that people have walked alongside us. So shout out to all you guys. And I'm excited to see what God continues to do.
Yeah. This has been great. It's been so much fun. But now, we have to answer the most important question of all. Friends and family don't count. Who is your favorite person that attends Imagine? I'm just kidding. That's a terrible idea. Terrible idea. No one answer that question. There is no right answer. But seriously, it has been really great to get to sit down and to do this. Even for me to hear a little bit about Imagine's history that I didn't have the privilege of being a part of, but I'm glad I get to be a part of it now, and a part of whatever Imagine's future is. Like you all said, we have no clue what it is. We know what we'll be about for sure. Our mission and our vision, our values, those are clear. But it's just a question of how is God gonna use and work through us as individuals and as a church. But super, super excited for that future and to see what it is that God has in store for us. That is all we have for this special episode of the Imagine Church podcast. I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who has tuned in and is watching this, being a part of this. You can follow us on all of our different social media pages. It is at Imagine Church MN on whether it's Facebook, Instagram. Our YouTube is Imagine Church MN as well. We look forward to getting to interact and to see you more in the future. And we will see you next time.